Today I'm gonna show you how to install vinyl floor covers. Let's get to work. In this step, I'm using an angle grinder with a suction cup connected to a vacuum cleaner to manage dust. Make sure your vacuum is powerful enough to handle the dust load. Here, I'm adjusting the height difference between the tiles and the vinyl. And look at that, beautiful. As I continue to grind along the walls, my colleague is using a multi-tool with a grinding triangle to grind the inner corners where I cannot reach with an angle grinder. Here, I'm sanding down the self-leveling compound with a sanding machine to remove any high spots and ensure a smooth, even surface. This step is important for getting a flawless vinyl installation and avoiding bumps or uneven areas later on. In the next video, I will show you how I apply self-leveling compound on concrete, so stay tuned. Once I've checked the surface with a straight edge and confirmed that it's flat and even, I move on to vacuuming the entire floor. This step removes all the dust and debris to ensure proper adhesion in the next stages. As I finish vacuuming each room, my colleague follows behind, applying UZIN PE 350 primer to seal and prepare the surface for the vinyl. This primer improves bonding and helps create a long-lasting installation. After waiting for about 30 minutes, the primer has dried and I can move on to the next step, spreading the adhesive. I'm using a glue trowel with an 8-2 notched blade to apply the glue evenly across the surface. The notches help control the amount of adhesive, ensuring proper coverage and a strong bond for the vinyl flooring. After spreading the glue, we need to wait about 15 to 30 minutes for it to dry to the right level before laying the vinyl. The exact waiting time depends on the environment. Factors like temperature, humidity, and air circulation all play a role. To speed up the drying process, it's a good idea to improve air circulation by opening windows and doors if possible. Once the glue has dried to the proper tackiness, we begin laying the vinyl floor covering in a herringbone pattern. It's especially important to handle the seams carefully during this step to ensure they align perfectly. After finishing the vinyl installation, I use a 50 kg roller to press down the vinyl tiles. This step ensures strong adhesion by removing any air pockets and helping the tiles bond evenly to the glue beneath. And here's the final look. Subscribe for more.